Welcome to From Caving In to Crushing It, the podcast for those who find themselves immersed in adversity and choose to write their story instead of having others write it for them. I'm Drew Duraney, and I'm your host. Zach, hey, it's so great to see you, my friend.
You too, Drew. I appreciate you having me today, brother.
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking the other day, sometimes you and I have known each other for a short time, and we had one phone call that, for me, it was very impactful in a positive way. And I've noticed that I may know people for 30, 40 years, right? And I may know people for 30, 40 minutes. And I find lately that the people I've known for 30, 40 minutes, I have a much, I don't know, it's like a stronger connection. It's hard to describe than people I've known for years. I don't know if that's good or bad, different, or because of my mindset's changed, but I want to thank you because you made a huge impact on me, and I really wanted to have you on the show. And I guess I just want to let you know that before we started. So I appreciate it.
Oh man, I appreciate that. And it's funny, especially in this podcasting world. It's such an interesting thing because and the way we got connected, we're
Yeah.
inquisitive about stuff. We want to learn and see and grow more. So it's almost like I feel the same way when I meet new folks like yourself or on my podcast. It turns into like almost like a refreshing piece to see new mindsets, new personalities, and see how people have very similar and very different struggles, but how we've all gone through it. So it's I definitely enjoyed it, man. Definitely enjoy it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's awesome. So you have an interesting background, and I admire what you're doing now. Can you try to catch us up on how you got where you are? Tell your story a little, um, and I'm just going to sit and listen.
Yeah, so man, I'm born and raised here in Atlanta, and that's very hard to find. It sounds like everybody's moving to Atlanta these days, but
Yep.
born and raised right here, man. And I was actually a police officer. It was my first gig
Okay.
here in Atlanta, so in my backyard, literally. Before that, I know we talked a lot about mentorship and different pieces, and it's funny. I did a little bit different upbringing where I was actually homeschooled in middle school and high school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, I went and I got my bachelor's degree while I was a police officer. So my early 20s, got my bachelor's. It took me about like 6.5 years, 7 years, something like that.
Right. Right.
But it was all remote, so similar to like homeschooling, right? And then
Right.
I left the police department, joined the military, and I became an infantry officer deployed to the Green Berets in 2019.
Okay.
Did a lot of my, I have a MBA in small business operations, did a lot of that remote actually from Afghanistan. So
No kidding. Oh,
during, man, very little Wi-Fi, but it was enough to read and write a paper or two. And
unbelievable.
it's crazy. During that time, I actually owned a couple businesses. I was operating a couple businesses from over there. So it's been a very interesting journey where police is usually what happens after the military, not before. And then
Right.
business
Right.
ownership,
Yeah.
business ownership never happens with government folks because government work is usually decent. So
Right.
yeah, so trying to figure out the world in a different way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, it completely makes sense. So, since you did it kind of backwards, but there's no written book on how you do things. You do things when you're ready and how you're ready. And how did the police training and the military training, how did that impact the bit? Well, you had the business before the military, so how did each one impact the other? Kind of like, did you adapt some skills you learned in each one and they all work together? I'd love to know that.
Yeah, so it's weird, the entrepreneurial mindset. I never meant to be an entrepreneur, never meant to be a business owner. The only thing I ever wanted to be was a police officer. So when I started that first company, it was actually my 2 weeks led into, I was 28 years old. My 2 week notice from the police department led into basic training. So at
Right.
28 years old, I'm a decade older than all the kids running laps around me, getting drill sergeants yelling at us. And my drill sergeant was younger than me and was in my face relentlessly. And 2 weeks before, I was arresting drug dealers and working narcotics. I'm like, what? So it was such a shift, but it was so humbling at the same time.
Yeah, right.
And during that, I knew I didn't want to get back into law enforcement, and I recognized a gap that I felt like I could provide. Where law enforcement, you can't make recommendations. You can't say install this lock, this alarm, this da da da. And I actually have a long why. The start with why with Simon saying my why
Yeah.
was actually something that happened on duty. But what it did is it shifted. Like, man, I think I could bridge this gap from how police officers are limited by liability. You'll get sued
Right.
if you say something wrong.
Right.
I can do this. I can help them, help the community in a different way. And that's where I started the first company, and it was phenomenal. But
Yeah.
where it tied into the military. I got out of training, came back, launched the business. Month six, I made $10,000 in month six alone, my first 10K month.
Hmm.
And that was after working for years. I was a police officer for 7 years, making 40,000 a year. So
Unbelievable.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm onto something. In month seven, I left to go to Afghanistan.
Oh
And
my
it's
goodness.
like
Yeah.
all of it shifted. So I had to really quickly figure out business operations,
Yeah.
remote operating, and really restructure the business where I was forced. So a lot of entrepreneurs work in the business, not on the business.
I'm
Well, I
sure.
couldn't do that from Afghanistan. So I had to
No, absolutely.
really, really study processes and figure out how to efficiently run a business, which doing that during the military, and then COVID hit after. So 6 months after I got back from Afghanistan, COVID
Right.
hit.
Of
I
course.
get rolling again, and then COVID hit, and I didn't miss a beat because I already learned how to really streamline operations. So
Absolutely. You
it
were
was really
forced to.
fortunate.
Yeah. You were
Yeah,
forced
really
to
fortunate.
prepare, and that, yeah,
Yeah,
that is fortunate.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was yeah, very fortunate. Not everybody was that lucky, but it was definitely good lessons. I kind of look at it lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom, and kind of
Mhm.
how do you operate and manage in a high stress environment.
Right.
And thankfully, I'm very well trained in that for
Good
sure.
for you. Good for you. When you transitioned out of the military, was it a difficult transition to civility and all that? Because I've talked to a lot of veterans where it has been difficult for them.
Yeah, so technically speaking, I'm actually still in the
You
military.
are. Okay.
Yeah, so I got injured in Afghanistan, but it wasn't found until it was 2 years ago this month, actually, right about this time. I went down to do push-ups. I was getting promoted. I was fast tracking after several of the awards I got and some of the work I did in COVID and with the CDC, and went down to do a push-up, dislocated my thumb.
Huh.
And I'm like, oh, that's weird. Stood up, popped it back into place, thinking nothing of it. And then my entire left arm from the elbow down went numb.
Whoa.
And I'm like, oh, well, that's not right. And we had a 4 day weekend. So in the military, you don't ruin a 4 day weekend. Like you go enjoy the 4 day weekend. I'm like, I'll check it out next week. Right.
Yeah.
Well, 5 days later, my entire arm was still numb and nothing had come back, no tingling, nothing. And the ring finger and pinky on my left hand stayed numb. And go through a bunch of tests and all this stuff. And come to find out, I had a massively pinched nerve in my elbow, your funny bone nerve.
Right. Right.
That
Right.
nerve was highly compressed, but instead of it actually presenting itself like it normally does with the numbness, it atrophied my hand and it didn't get the nutrients in my hand. So, which is why my thumb dislocated.
Ooh.
So, fast forward to now, I just had my first medical discharge appointment last week, 20 months later,
Wow.
because the military is so slow in. I wasn't for 4 months out of these 20 months. I've actually gotten treatment on the arm. I mean, it's one of those, I still don't have feeling in the hand, can't really use the left hand very much. And working on that medical retirement. But all
Right.
that to say, when that injury happened is one of the darkest times. I actually, about the same time the injury happened, turned down an 8-figure deal from a very large broadcast company for one of my companies.
Yeah.
I scaled one company in COVID to 155 countries, and I was getting a lot of VC interest. Turned that down for other reasons, wanting to maintain the altruism attached to the
Yeah.
mission we were accomplishing.
Goodness. Yeah.
At that point, I owned 6 companies, and when all of this happened the week before the surgery in March 2 years ago,
Hmm.
I was at the end of a dock with a pistol in my mouth, and I was so miserable. And knowing this injury was going to take the uniform from me, that's the long term. I'm no longer good at the infantry. I'm no longer good at the army.
Right.
The big army already said they didn't want me. The state side already said that they couldn't do anything for me. So felt completely worthless, like used up. Like I gave everything. I gave an arm, literally.
Oh my God, you
It
did.
felt used up. And it's like,
Yeah.
now you don't need me. And I thought that was the rock bottom point where I was just going to become a statistic. On paper, at 32 years old, on paper, I was massively successful
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
massively miserable, knowing I was going to lose everything I'd worked for. I was going to lose my identity, the uniform, the flag I fought for 15 years. Like
Right.
ripped away from me, which is where the actual cover of my book came from.
Okay.
It's the American flag heart with a tear through it, and it's
Yeah.
actually a photo that I took in Afghanistan as the background, and
Okay.
it really signifies all that getting torn away from me because I hated it, man. It was a terrible transition because it's like now you're not good to anybody, and
Oh
I
my
actually
goodness.
internalized that quite
Right.
heavily.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is interesting how most men, and I'm sure women, some women do it too, you tie your self-identity and your self-worth to the job you get paid for or that you do for service. And when you rely on an external circumstance or something outside of you for the level of your self-worth, when something goes bad, your self-worth goes bad. So I feel for you, man. I'm just trying to process everything you just said. So the part where you mentioned at the end of the dock with a pistol in your mouth, what got you to take the thing out of your mouth and turn around and say, "No, there's something to live for"? What was it?
That recognition didn't happen for me, actually.
Okay.
I sent a text message to my now ex-wife,
Mm-hmm.
and I sent a text to her. We have a goddaughter that lived with us at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was stationed elsewhere, if you
Yeah.
will, and so back home she was there with the goddaughter and the goddaughter's mother, and I sent her a text. I said, "Hey, don't worry about me anymore. Life insurance is going to take care of you. You'll have everything you could ever ask for." Thinking just like, "Hey, just don't worry about me. Stop worrying about me." Because it was a very um, I brought a lot home from Afghanistan. I lost 6 guys out of 50, brought a lot of guilt home, leader guilt, survivor guilt, and just never dealt with it.
Right.
So I was really angry. And I was so angry at the world, angry at myself. And there's so much to unpack attached to. Thankfully, later I got therapy and now I can conceptualize it better. But sent her this text message and she sent back, "The cops are on the way. Don't you dare." And the guy that was a cop just a few years before, I then spent 6 hours in my apartment complex hiding in bushes and running from cops. I became a criminal and I got so angry. So the rage I felt internally, then I turned and displaced onto her and blamed her for calling the cops on me. Like, how could you? How dare you? And for a long time, I held it against her. It was like, how could you betray me like that? Right? I was on my way out. I was good and then spent hours running from the cops. So it wasn't that something took the pistol out of my mouth and I decided against it. It's that that rage got redirected in a way.
I
So
see.
instead of being mad at myself, I became mad at her. And that sounds like a rock bottom point, and it wasn't for me. Like that
Okay.
wasn't where I actually look at rock bottom. And I could talk about that piece a little bit more, but as far
Yeah.
as that one instant, that's where it shifted for me.
In a way, and I don't know if I'm processing the right way, it's almost like a thank you to her for turning that rage from within to outside. Because if she hadn't texted you, "The cops are coming," what would you have done?
It, Being that cop, end of a doc, I would have been found for weeks. Like I had it planned enough
Right.
to
Right.
understand. Like it wasn't going to be something where somebody had saved me, and it would have been done for. And
Right. Right.
um, people say it's selfish. People say that path is the wrong path for some reasons, and I agree in a lot of capacities. But there were things that the skeletons in the closet, the military, and the police, they teach you to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
Take the
Yeah.
skeletons, bury that shit, bury it in the closet, and continue the mission. If you're on an op and your battle buddy, if your best friend gets killed, they drop and you keep moving. And so you're just taught to disengage. And what I found out later, as I was going through therapy, I found out later it's actually a sector of PTSD called avoidance, where
Okay.
you learn to just avoid those feelings, you avoid all that. But what ended up happening is every night when I was miserable and I was at the bottom of a bottle of bourbon, those skeletons started clawing at the door,
Of
and
course,
it's
because
like
I'm never.
a
Yeah.
volcano. It just bubbles up, and eventually it explodes.
Yeah.
And that was where I couldn't maintain that, right? And
Yes.
that's
Yes.
where it started showing itself,
Hmm.
and I isolated myself, didn't have relationships, friends, family, anybody, because
Right.
I isolated myself. I didn't want people to see me like that. It was
Of
almost
course.
embarrassing to an
Right.
extent.
Right. Right. It is interesting that when we go through trauma, and trauma is all relative. I mean, I can't compare what I've gone through to what you've gone through. For each one of us, it was equally as painful. Um, we tend to shun the support systems that we have helped us in the past. Because I know I did it, and it's interesting how the human mind does that. Because yeah, the embarrassment, the I don't want you to feel sorry for me, that kind of stuff. Whereas it is actually healthier to be able to reach out and ask for help. And I mean, that's something I'm trying to help men realize that it's okay to ask for help. So how did you get to
And
the point where you finally did get to go to a therapist? Lead me up to that path.
yeah, and that's the funny part is I think the reason, looking back at it, the reason I didn't ask for help from the people that I knew would show up is I didn't really want the help. They would actually show up. It's like, oh
Yeah,
crap, what if they actually show up? And
yeah.
the people that I could have called would have actually shown up.
Mm,
So it's like I purposefully refused help almost. Like I didn't
right.
conceptualize it then. I wasn't thinking about
Oh,
this
of
is what I'm
course,
gonna
yeah.
do. It's
Yeah,
like,
you just do it
you know,
automatically, yeah.
right. So fast forward, the next week, I left the training I was in, moved back to Atlanta. Didn't have anywhere to go. One buddy of mine, a Navy veteran, let me sleep on the sofa in his child's playroom for a couple months. That was the only
Okay.
spot I could find to come back to Atlanta. And we
Mm,
had a long conversation one night, and he he this is the rock bottom point.
okay.
He said, Zach, you've done all these amazing things. You've paid for mentorship, coaching, the MBA. You've always sought external knowledge. You've done such a great job trying to learn more externally. Dale Carnegie instructor, police instructor, everything you could imagine to garner more knowledge. He said the one thing you've never done is look inside to learn more about yourself.
Wow.
And he's like, go upstairs, and I bet you can't look in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself. Me being the brash and audacious, high performer, like, ha, watch, I love me some me. So I march off, never turn down a challenge, march off upstairs, go look in the mirror. And I look, and then I immediately had an anxiety attack,
Oh my
balled up on
God.
the floor for 2 hours and just bawled for
Yeah.
hours because the one person you should be able to tell that you love couldn't do it. And that was the rock bottom point. That was the part where the first chapter in my book is called A Look in the Mirror.
Mm,
That was the part. Taking a look in the mirror was so devastating to me. And that's where I finally realized this is rock bottom. I have to find answers to this internalization that I'm missing. And that's where therapy, the next week I started therapy with an amazing program. I got out on a mission of knowledge to figure out who the heck I was, not who
right.
the
Right.
uniform lieutenant or officer
No,
knight was.
no.
Who's past that? Who am I? What part of me do I love?
Yes,
And then
absolutely.
it let me fall. Essentially, I dated myself, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
rediscovered
yeah.
who the heck I was and
Absolutely.
then started falling in love with myself again. And it was a
Yeah.
huge shift.
Geez, the gratitude you must feel for your buddy who had the wherewithal, the wisdom, the knowledge, and the courage to actually say that to you, not knowing what your reaction would be.
Right. I'm not in a good mind space. I'm not
Yeah,
necessarily a small guy. I'm
could have
pretty well
been.
trained in a lot of things. So
Yep.
ballsy, very ballsy
He
to
took a
say
risk.
it.
Yep, he took a
And
risk, and he didn't
that's
care what the
somebody that
he wanted.
but that's
Yeah.
somebody that truly loves you as a
Yes.
man to man, as a friend. So that's
Yes.
somebody that cares about you. That's who you need to surround yourself with. Like, holy
Absolutely.
cow, what if I didn't have him as a friend, a
Yeah.
mentor?
Yeah.
Man, where would I be now? Because he cared
Absolutely.
enough to say that.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful to hear, and that's one of the things where a lot of men don't have that, and you don't want men to fall into that victim mindset where I don't have somebody. You can go out and find somebody. You've got when you're doing okay, when you're doing quote unquote well or better, that's the time to look for your mentor and role model because it's the times when you're not thinking about it that you're going to need it. You know. And all right, so wow, so you've come a long way, man, and you're very inspiring. So once you finally were able to tell yourself you loved you, and you did the therapy, and you started working your way, I say you've already gone from the caving in to now you're in the coping stage.
Mhm.
I feel right now you're in the crushing it stage. So how did you get through that coping stage to start to be more self-aware and change that mindset that I am going to do so much more that's going to help myself and help others?
It took a shift in perspective, and it took a huge dose of grace for
Right,
myself.
right,
One of the things going through therapy that my therapist said, the very first call, this is where I actually accepted um, having him as a therapist. Very
okay,
first call.
right,
And I interviewed, a dozen therapists. And I always found a reason to say no, right? Just nitpicking.
right,
And this guy said, you know what? Have you ever thought that you didn't pull the trigger that killed your guys? Because I always said, oh, I killed these guys. I got these men killed.
right,
I'm the one planning the operations. I did this. He's like,
yeah,
have you ever thought to actually blame the enemy combatant that pulled the trigger. And I was like, I literally sat back in my chair, like, holy cow, I've never, like, the thought never crossed my mind. I consider myself a smart dude, but like,
Yeah.
never thought. So having that shift in perspective of like, wow, I didn't actually pull the trigger, and
Yeah.
I'm dishonoring the memory of these men by thinking I did this to them, and I'm like taking away the value that they gave to this world.
Right.
It wasn't honoring them in the way that I should have, and that grace and having that understanding shifted in a lot of ways for me to recognize that the best way I love putting it in, or best way I love saying is that my morning routine involves the gym every morning, every single day. I don't take any off days unless
Hmm.
something happens. I wake up, I go to the gym. And one of the big pieces for me was recognizing that just like at the gym, you don't go in day one and walk out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger that
Right.
same day.
Right. Right. Exactly.
For your mind, you have to be putting in the reps day in, day out. And I told you about my hand, and I have a whole story of how I got to this, but I actually picked up the piano and
Yeah.
started learning to play the piano as recovery for this
Wonderful.
issue. And
Right.
you
Right.
think a weighted key on a piano, and I can't even feel two fingers. So imagine that controls your grip. So I can't even put pressure. I had to learn how to roll my hand a certain way,
Okay.
right? But it challenged me, stimulated me mentally. I
Yeah.
started journaling. I love classical music, so it's
Okay.
always when I was really high anxiety, I would put earphones in, listen to classical music. I'm like, what if I actually create it and not just listen to it? So the
Wow.
first day I practiced for 6 hours. By week two, I was playing a piece of Mozart, and I'm like, it was terrible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not
It's all right. It doesn't matter how good or bad it
never played
was.
an instrument in my life. So like
Yeah.
but it was enough for me to be like, wow, what am I actually capable of?
Yep.
And you think of all that I've done in my life, I'm pretty dang capable of a lot of really interesting things, but like
Yeah.
the mind is so strong. So putting the reps in from journaling to reading, playing the piano, that meditation piece,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
couple times a day, I actually have it blocked off in my calendar. Walk. I have a 16-year-old husky, so I
Uh-huh.
walk my husky and cook lunch, and then
Yeah.
walk my husky and cook dinner. It's actually in my calendar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So preserving and being selfish with myself in my own
Hmm.
time,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
Caring for myself enough to put myself first,
Hmm.
when for so many years that servant mentality can be toxic if you're not
It can.
careful,
It can.
because you're giving all the time and you're never refilling your own coffer to be able to give to others. And for
Absolutely.
me, that was the big shift, is like, how do I maintain that and just keep doing the reps over and over and over again? Because you have to
Hmm.
maintain that semblance of a decent mindset.
Yeah. It's very helpful. You mentioned about putting it in your calendar and then not just putting it in your calendar, but honoring what you put in your calendar and doing it. I struggle with that, Zach. Maybe you can help me with that at some point.
Well, it's one of those things, and having grace, like that
Yeah.
time is actually right now while we're recording,
Hmm.
but knowing how valuable this conversation is to me, it's that piece, right? It's
Right.
like, wow, this is worth me shifting this, because this is like one of those, I'm refilling my coffer. But you don't have this conversation. It's not client time. It's not all these businesses that I'm not putting
Yeah.
out a fire. It's like, this lets me reflect on things. This lets me have a great conversation about this stuff.
Yeah.
This is worth. So it's not 100% solid concrete all the time, but as
Right.
soon as we get off this, I'm going to go walk the pup and make lunch, right? So
Good.
it's
Good for you.
having that
Absolutely.
grace and
Absolutely.
flexibility to maintain it. That rigidity is great at times, but you
Yeah.
got to flex a little bit for a good convo.
Well, I'm honored that you kept this time. And you know what? If you had told me that you had, I would have said we can do a different time, just because, and that's not the people pleaser in me either, because I'm a reformed people pleaser, but
Oh, I get that one.
I would
Trust
have
me.
done, that's a tough, that's toxic being a people pleaser. I'm
Yeah,
telling you. Um,
100%.
yeah, yeah. So, what I want to be able to help you. What does the audience need to know about Zack Knight? Tell them about what you do, how you service people and your businesses, whatever you want them to know. Tell us a little about that and how they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And the first piece, my book I released on Veterans Day a few months ago, and it's called The Legacy of Love: A Journey of Self Mastery, and it actually highlights everything we just talked about. It highlights the steps I took, the tactical, applicable steps that I took, um, small things every day, right? And it highlights that. That's found on Amazon. I actually I did a lot of research on ancient leaders, and look back to the Romans, and they're all philosophers, the
Okay.
philosophical leader. And
Hmm.
I read Meditations and Marcus Aurelius and different pieces there. And when I released the book, it released #1 in mental health and #1 in philosophy mythology. So I thought that was really fascinating to see how
Wow.
my leadership style has really shifted.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
the book is a big piece that I'm really highlighting now. And the other piece is the newest organization, my seventh company. I just launched in October, about the same time of the book, and
Hmm.
it's called ATL Vets, Advancing the Line for Veterans. I'm really focused on small business owners that are veteran owned, knowing how much the mindset impacts the business for every entrepreneur.
Right. Right.
I do this on the business side with Be a Tactical Leader, but I wanted to give this to the veteran community, seeing the struggles I went through and talk about
Hmm.
my struggles.
Absolutely.
And ATL Vets is a big piece that's really going crazy right now, having some amazing things and
When you
hosting a bunch
send,
of
did you send
events.
that to me in the bio, the information?
Absolutely.
You already
Absolutely.
did, or you will? Do send that
I
to me.
believe I
It's
did.
all right.
I'm
I'll
not
check.
sure.
I'll check it for the show notes, but I
Oh,
want to put that in
yeah.
the show notes for you. So okay.
Yeah, that piece is huge, man, because and there are, of course, female veterans out there, love them all.
Yep.
I only served with men in the infantry, so when I say
Right.
this, I speak to those men of like,
Right.
we need men to lead the charge in the mindset piece. A
Hmm.
lot of guys don't want to hear about it in the personal life. So, hey, let's work on your business. But every time you talk about business, it goes back to this is what I'm struggling with personally.
Yep.
So I've recognized there's a good balance there. And that's the
There is.
big piece I'm really trying to support right now. And I have about 10 events in person a month here in Atlanta. I'm doing a
Hmm.
massive conference here this summer where I have some amazing sponsors, and it all goes back, all the profits go back to support ATL vets and
Good. Okay.
really focus on that business entrepreneurship. So recognize like the big pieces, like recognize the mindset feeds into it. And if you're a business owner out there, like you got to get the mind right, learn to lead yourself, and then you'll
Hmm.
more effectively lead others.
Yeah. It's a very good point. The mind. What I've noticed too is a lot of men, um, the same men who are resistant delegating in their business are the same men who are resistant asking for support in their personal life.
Control.
And yeah,
You have that
it is.
iron grip. You
It
have to
is
be in control.
control and being a fix. I fix things. Now, what we learned growing up, which I think was a lie, is you need to separate business and personal life because to me it didn't make logical sense. You're
It's
sleeping
impossible.
quote unquote 8 hours of the day, right? And your person. Let's pretend it's an even 8 hours. How do you have everything at home and then stop it and then go to work? You can't. Human beings aren't meant for that. And what I've seen is there are a lot of skills that men have personally that they don't adapt to their business, and a lot of skills they have in their business that they don't adapt to their personal life.
Guilty. Holy cow, let me tell you how guilty
Yeah.
I am. Think about law enforcement.
Hmm.
I thought I couldn't bring that home to, I'm twice divorced.
Right.
The police department ended up breaking up the first marriage because of all the things I went through. I worked undercover narcotics and gang investigations, like SWAT operator, all those things I internalized,
Of
which
course.
fed into the home.
Of course.
Military then did the same thing.
Yep.
And that whole work life balance concept is impossible as a business owner.
Right.
The shift I've seen is integrated life. How do you
Yes.
integrate the
Hmm.
life
Right.
that you're living at home? Because I was wearing so many different masks, and then I'm
Hmm.
never genuine to myself, and you never knew who the heck I was. So how could somebody love something that you don't even know,
Right.
right? You can't even learn who I am. So
Right.
that integrated life, I mean, that's a great point, really. Got to figure out that integrated life for it all.
Right. And too, so we got to work with people. It's people like you and me are gonna. It's got to be a grassroots efforts because the powers that be are not going to do this. So you think about we got to work on that integrated life. And the second thing is you have the military and the police who teach you or indoctrinate you certain things, what not to, the whole compartmentalize and all that. They have a duty to then when you transition out to help you unlearn that compartmentalization and try to help you, train you to assimilate back to reality, I say it. And that's where we need a lot of the aftercare for former police officers and former
Which doesn't
military
happen.
veterans. It doesn't
That
happen. So we got
doesn't.
to create it. And that's really the types of stuff because that mindset is exactly what's changed for you when you're in those establishments. And when you leave, they don't untrain you.
Right. And from the time I was in Afghanistan to the time I was back on my own sofa
Yeah.
was 5 days.
Wow.
And I'm back living my quote unquote normal life,
Right.
5 days after I ran offensive operations every 4 days for a year. Then
Unbelievable.
5 days later, I'm on my own sofa. How do
Well,
you? There's no decompressing
no,
from all that. Like you can't. There's no gear down on that
no,
capacity. So of course things started cracking all around
yeah,
me, and
yeah.
100% I agree. We have to do a better job as men, man to man, right? Like men can bond
Oh
in a
yeah,
different way, and it's like
absolutely.
man to man, we have to do a better job about recognizing the conversations we don't want to have, like loving yourself. You got to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
We got to be able to talk about this with each other and recognize we're all struggling with very similar things as men.
We are.
And if we
We
talk
are.
about it, we all start healing a little bit more.
Yep. It's all about the debrief, right? We do debriefs in
Absolutely.
meetings, debriefs in any kind of tactical plan. We got to
Yep.
debrief our mindset and debrief the day together and help each other, lift each other up. Well, Zach, I could talk to you for hours and hours. I thank you so much for your time and for your service and for the friendship we've begun. And I trust this won't be the last time you and I speak, my friend.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you for having me and definitely keep on doing this good work, my man.
All right, you too, Zach. Take care of yourself. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and give us a review to help others find it. I'd like you to answer this question. Are you living the life you want to live, or are you living the life others want you to live? I'd like you to think about that for a second, because I strongly suggest you live the life you want to live. If you want to learn more about what I stand for and my services and how I'm able to help many men get out of their own way, please go to my website at www.profitcompassion.com. Feel free to also email me at drew@profitcompassion.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Take care of yourself and choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you.